I have back this week Jackie F. Fuller, a communications professional and freelance writer for the Washington Informer newspaper covering religious news in the African American community. Jackie also is an alumni or alumnus of Marymount University, Marymount University, with a degree in communications. In 2016, she was acknowledged by the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington as an emerging leader for her work in religious communications. She's worked for various nonprofit organizations in Washington, D.C., and a member of numerous professional and community organizations to include Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, National Association of Black Journalists, Society of Professional Journalists, and Religion Communicators Council, and served as their national president from 2019 through 2021. Thank you, Jackie, for joining the show.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. But I just want to give a quick disclaimer. This is anything I share, it's on me, my own opinions, not affiliation with anyone.
Yes, it's strictly her opinion, hers only. She's not a representative for anybody but just Jackie. You know. Same for me. So we had a discussion, and we always have great discussions, and we probably could have 4 or 5 topics on this show just this evening, but we're going to stick to two topics. And one of the things that we were talking about last week was one topic that I wanted to talk about, but we decided that we would do this topic because it was much more energy in that topic. It's like, we were going back and forth about it. And you were talking about your experiences in terms of the job market. And do you want to go on a little into that, what you were saying?
Sure. I guess I could do it collectively. Obviously, with job searches, there are highs and lows, and then particularly coming from a generation being a Gen Xer, where I remember the times when we had to fill out paper applications, we had to fax, we had to mail, fax out applications, mail applications, do those kind of walk-in things.
You know what I remember? I remember when you had to go out and buy a certain kind of paper, and the paper had a watermark. It was a really big deal with the watermark on your resume paper.
I didn't know about the watermark, but I was familiar with the different type of resume papers and the colors that they come in, and it had like a more professional feel. And some people said that was actually good to use too because of the weight. It kind of makes your resume stand out from everyone else's resumes.
Yeah. And so the old school way of how we used to sort of, get our resumes out there is definitely not the way that you would. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't discount it. I still see value in actually mailing someone a resume. It definitely makes you stand out if someone is, but it's so hard to get someone's, to get people's address any longer because, so many things that I wouldn't say it's like, I'd say terrorist attacks but now after 9/11, it's just very difficult to get people's information inside their company. And so it's kind of hard to send them a hard, what do you actually even call that? A hard copy. Actually difficult to do that, but if you do have that, I would definitely, and if you're going to meet the time constraints, because sometimes by the time your real resume gets there and get into their hands, position has already been, someone's already found, they already found someone, or so I would still do it the way that we should be doing it now, which is online and email. But if you want to be really technical and really fancy and really stand out, then mail it in.
Yep. That's definitely something to consider. I actually did that with one organization I wanted to work for. They did respond back, but I think at the time, organization, I guess the position had already been filled. And that's another thing at times they forget to do. It's like, you need to take this position down because you already had the person in there for 30 days. resumes or into the job. So you
Right.
got to keep those like kind of those things up to date as well.
I
Mhm.
think one of the things that we're talking about was just, when you are applying for jobs and they are reaching out to you, say, you apply to a job, they are reaching out to you, and through the conversation, you really realize that they really haven't read your resume. And you also realize that, um, one of the things that you was talking about was, well, how dare you? It was sort of the kind of attitude that you had, and the reason why you
I don't.
felt,
It wasn't like how dare you.
maybe I'm exaggerating, but it was sort of kind of
Yeah.
like, you have my resume. You know that I know my qualifications. You see my education level. You see how many years I have,
Oh, I got
and
you. Where you coming from with that? That was dealing with recruiters online. So what will happen sometimes is that, like, my background is pretty much like director and up, right? And
hmm
if you're sitting in me a position where it's like administrative assistant or like a coordinator, and I'm just like, and then particularly because those type of positions have you know like a lesser amount of years of experience versus someone who's been working for what over 20 years.
hmm
So I was like, did you really read my resume when you reached out to me about an admin assistant position, or you're just
right.
blasting resumes because you got to meet a certain quota of how many
hmm
resumes are coming in for these positions?
Or there's a
So
key word there on your resume that
it's
that sort of,
that's
I guess, came. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just thought about that. Yeah, it could also have been the keyword thing. But that was saying you have to still kind of scan it to some degree and realize this individual has been working for a while, and that person
hmm
beyond the administrative assistant stage. And usually I just send those, like I just forward those jobs to other people that in my
hmm
networks who are in that, in that who are either looking for that type of work or have the years of experience that they're
Right.
seeking.
Yeah, I'm the same
Mhm.
way. If being a career coach, if someone sends me jobs that have like nothing to do with what I'm interested in or doesn't sort of fit, of course I keep the job announcement, and if I know anybody that is interested in or would fit sort of their wheelhouse, I forward it
Mhm.
to them. And also, it's good to have that recruiter's name just sort of in my saved emails, so I can just ask them, hey, do you have any open positions that are sort of, within this wheelhouse for this particular person who's looking for a job? So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
never, delete it, or I rarely delete it unless it's like totally like, and I do sometimes get emails from car dealerships, auto dealerships,
I
asking,
see.
yeah, I'm like, and so those I do delete. But hey, we all need to know there are some good job at the dealership, but
Mhm.
I don't really think that's where I want to send people.
Right.
But yeah, you get those emails from recruiters, and you feel that you can definitely sense that they have not read your resume or have not read it thoroughly.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I used to get those car dealership gigs years ago. And I think that's when they said um my resume on some of the kind of major job search board websites like a
hmm
monster.com. Yeah, I don't get those anymore because I think now with my search being very tailored,
hmm
I've been getting other types of positions. So, but yeah,
So
even
how?
with when that happens, I'll write them back and say, "Hey, thank you for reaching out. At this time, I am seeking
mm,
for a senior level position making
Oh, good,
XYZ salary range. So
good.
if you have those positions in mind, please feel free to contact me." So it's not even though I'm saying I'm based on that position, which is like I'm totally overqualified for. I at least let them know if you have positions like that that do come in to
hmm
to contact me
hmm
and see if
Well,
possibly a job is something I can do.
you said that you've now tailored your job search so that you're getting um, more specific jobs that are in alignment with what you're looking for. How did you
Right.
do that?
It just pretty much read. A lot of it was particularly in the summary that I have at the top and the skills. So as far as my work history, most of those positions either show that I've done stuff in digital communications, I've done stuff in journalism, or I've done things in television or video production. So I have it like more crafted to that, where you can get to feel that this person pretty much spent her majority of her career in communications.
So what you've done is you have now what I call a targeted resume.
Right. So pretty much what I just do at the top, I may just switch some of the messaging or the words. Like if I'm looking for a communications director position, I'll mention like I have this, experience as a communications director or a digital director. If it's something related to journalism, I emphasize and change the wording around to tailor my journalism skills.
So you actually have maybe 2 or 3 separate resumes that are tailored to the specific job that you're looking for.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I tell clients all the time. It may be tedious, but you do need to tailor your resume down to the job, the specific job that you're looking for. And it may be other things that you're looking for to do as well. And you need to tailor it to those as well. So you may have 2, 3, 4, 5 different resumes that you are sending to different jobs. And job boards are, they allow you to upload different resumes so that you can apply to different kinds of jobs that may pertain to your wheelhouse, but you're sort of being very specific to the kind of position that you're interested in or positions that you're interested in.
Yeah, exactly. And it just makes it easier that way too. So then I can just say, hey, this is for a digital director position. So I'll send my resume up to that, to those types of positions. So I said, hey, they're looking for a multimedia journalist. So I'll just send multimedia journalist.
That's what you're, we're going to advertise from here a little bit. So anyone who's listen to the show, you say, because I say put it out there, and your experience. So that way, if people are interested, they know who to call, But we'll definitely have Jackie's information down in the description, the show description, and you can reach out to her and get more information about her experience. And if you just want to have a conversation with her and have her on your show, and she actually has a podcast and she has her own show, and she may have you on her show.
Yeah, it's it's not officially yet a podcast, but it seems like, I guess that's the direction I need to go, because it's merging a lot of my show with Interfaith Connections. That's the name of the show, to YouTube. But there seems to be like this massive energy around the show becoming a podcast, because a lot of people keep asking me, oh, is it a podcast too? Is it a podcast too? And I just still haven't figured out what that podcast structure is going to look like, unless it's kind of a mix. Like if I just have the TV part also be at the podcast part. I haven't figured out that part yet, or if it's going to be something different. But yes, I definitely am tapping into that world as well, which is like the fun thing about YouTube, and I'm learning how to build up the channel, because it was just something I had put on the back burner for so long, which that happens when you're doing a lot of different things. You tend to put your projects on the side. So now here comes the fall, and I'm like, okay, it's time to get like the YouTube channel up and jumping now. So
yeah, because I definitely see it. If I have seen, I actually have liked you or followed you on where I have my podcast, whatever they call it, the platform or the company that sort of houses your podcast. And we're both up there, and like, let me like Jackie, let me like her podcast. And I wanted to pay like, nothing's up here. What are the episodes at, Jackie? So I'm glad to hear that you definitely are considering moving into that direction, and because I think there's a lot of value that you can definitely add to that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about was, and sometimes I don't advise people to put their salary requirements on their resume, but then again, I do sometimes tell people to put their salary requirements on. It's really depends on the person's, the background, the job that you're looking for, it's different. You really have to know the reasons why you're putting your salary requirements on your resume.
Right.
So what are your feelings towards that?
Well, I've never done the salary on my resume, but I do provide, which I'm starting to do that again now. I'm providing a salary range on my cover letters because of one of the common things that happened during the job search process. Looking at a job announcement, and they don't have the salary listed at all. They just said your salary is going to be based on your experience. Well, I'm like, well, what does that mean?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's like based on my experience. Well, are you going to be able to handle someone with the level of experience I have in regards to salary? And yes, somebody can have wonderful years of experience doing various things in their career. But I feel like it's also, to me, it's an etiquette thing, and just being upfront and knowing that you have a certain budget, have a certain budget or range that you can work with in regards to hiring somebody for that position. And if the person is going to be overqualified, as much as you may like that person, as much as you may want to hire or bring that person on board, there's going to be some issues there with salary, because people have bills. I always say people have bills to pay.
Right.
And then in addition, that thought just left me. I'm trying to get it back, but it has regards to the salary. What was it? Because a lot of it is based on also maybe what's the benefits that's offered. So if you could factor in maybe what's happening on the benefits side, what do they have to offer there in addition to the salary, it can probably work out that way in negotiation process. But
negotiation process. But the thing we were discussing, one of the things that we had said was, maybe they can't meet your salary requirements, but maybe during the negotiation process, and sometimes before you even get to the negotiation process, a discussion about, is this part-time? Is this job full-time? Right. Is this coming in as an independent contractor, meaning that I will not I'm going to pay for my own benefits, because all those things are options that maybe the employer may be interested in discussing. Maybe they will say, we need someone who's part-time, and that allows me to look for another position that may pay more. Right. But I still have this other part-time job that's still paying me, not maybe it's all that I would want, but it's still giving me the experience, and, it's paying the bills. And so I still, when you discuss salary requirements, you have to think about the entire scenario, not just, it's not paying me the right amount of money, I don't want to take it. It's, that's what kind of... it's not paying me.
You gotta have some really good benefits to kind of balance that, and that also is going to depend on the industry that you're in. I can see that probably more so corporate. I don't know, maybe from what I've experienced in nonprofit, it's very rare that happens. And if so, you better hope there's other things, like the organization has a strong and good, brand reputation for that. And then what are the possibilities for that person to move up?
Right. You got to have a strategy in mind about why you're accepting a job. I have accepted jobs in the past where I was paid less than I would have preferred, but I had to, but it was like, look, I was at a place where there was a gap in employment where things were, just going through, the country's going through a recession, and all those things. So I really had to stop and say, well, what is my strategy? And my strategy was, I'm going to accept this job that's not paying me, exactly the amount that I would like. But I had to go back and reevaluate a lot of things. The car that I was driving, I had to change that. I had to change some of the things that I enjoy, like dry cleaning. I had to get, that wasn't no longer something that I could afford with that salary. I usually wear nice starched dress shirts. That changed to wrinkle-free golf shirts. So I really had to, make adjustments so that salary wouldn't be an impediment um to pay my bills on time, and also having and also being able to put money into my savings account.
Right, right. Yeah, I've lived that life. I've done I think a good chunk of my career in the nonprofit sector was a whole bunch of pay cuts from what I usually or could have been making, particularly with someone with my digital background. And then, like it said, probably as of 2019, 2020, I was like, yeah, I can't do pay cuts anymore because I wasn't able to meet my financial goals. And then sometimes if you're in work environments that tend to be toxic, it's like, yeah, this is
Oh no,
not
I will never accept the pay cut for a
good.
toxic environment. I mean, you can
Well,
even
you won't find out till you get in. You don't find those
you,
things out till you get in there.
till
So
you
it's
get
kind
in
of,
there,
but when
right?
you do those reflection moments, or you're thinking about changing careers, which that's really happening right now due to the pandemic or the COVID situation, it's allowing people to, I believe, rethink their careers. I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine, former colleague at a former employer. That's one of the conversations we had recently where she realized she plateaued, like she reached probably her point and it's like, do I want to continue to be in the same position? I've been in this organization a long time, or is it time for me to move on to a new organization, or better yet, change careers and have a new profession to consider?
Hmm.
So she's going through that whole process now. And I was telling her about the book, What Color is Your Parachute? Because that would be a good start. Because I said it's
Okay.
really hard. People say, well, can you help me figure this out? And I'm like, well, if you don't know, then I can't help you because you don't know, right? So
Right,
it's
right.
like you need to start with
You need to
that book
call a
first.
career coach if she
Yeah,
needs.
I told her those are also options like a career coach, a career planner, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then the first thing that came to my mind, I was like,
Was
yeah, you probably need something like at least
and
a
that
book
book is
like that for
called
guiding.
it's called what
I have an
again?
old version of it. I'm sure 2021 is out right now. Mine is 2016. It's What Color is Your Parachute? It's been around for a long time. I
Okay.
mean, generations upon generations probably have used
I have
this
to look
book
for
to
that
get
one.
jobs. Probably, I want to say maybe since the 70s. It's
Wow.
been around for a long time. I
A long
might be
time.
over. When did the book originally come out? Yeah, the first edition came out in 1970. Yeah, according to I'm looking at from the copyright
Hmm, hmm.
leading up to at the
Wow.
time 2016. So the
That
book's been
must
around a
be
long
the
time.
book.
I
So
didn't
up
find out about it till like that until that
it's
time.
2016.
Mhm.
So one of the things that let's just shift to the situation of networking, because um I think that networking is key to you know getting positions or hearing about positions that you may not have heard about if you would just applying to job boards or recruiters giving you emails to jobs that you're overqualified for, or don't meet your salary requirements. So what networking do you do that sort of maybe directly or indirectly gives you access to maybe information that you typically wouldn't get in a normal situation outside of
Uh,
networking?
Outside of that, well, pretty much my source of information in regards to looking for jobs is joining professional organizations. That seems to be the big one I do. Occasionally, I get things come in from professionals I know in the industry, those or like friends and colleagues. They'll
Mhm.
send job announcements to me, but most of it I had to really like do my research and say, okay, how can I find jobs in the industry that I want to be in? And
Mhm.
particularly on the journalism side, you really got to be involved in the journalism groups or the professional organizations, because that's where a lot of those announcements will come out. Whereas more likely they'll reach out to you as well because you're in an environment based on this organization and the target interest of professionals in that industry. So, for example, the National Association of Black Journalists, there's a DC chapter here. They will do events where you get to meet with the recruiters at some of the national media companies
Mhm. Mhm.
like CBS. I did the tour with CBS, and then they also had one recently where you would meet with the recruiter, and they did something similar to that with the Washington Post. Those two stand out. But it was always a matter of just being in those organizations. They have these events, and then you can you have the opportunity sometimes to do the one-on-one, like with kind of ask questions, not necessarily one-on-one, but you're in that group and you get to ask questions about how to get in the industry. Because on one recommendation when I was at CBS, they were saying to me that I should look at, because of my nonprofit background, look at getting in as like community relations, that kind of thing. If the station or any network has like those departments, and then look there for those type of jobs. And then you can transition and do the writing and the journalism, stuff like that. So it's always a matter of getting your foot in the door, like what various avenues can you do to get in that industry. So I looked at like an organization like that, and then there's some in the area that are strictly networking groups, and you just get on their mailing list. And then there's other people. It's interesting that because we have so much now with technology and people using things like Patreon, things like that, people who are in the industry, they are creating their kind of like their own membership like groups. You join an email list, and you may pay like $2, $5, or in some cases they're free, and you just get on these individuals' mailing list, and they just dedicate time throughout the week and say, hey, here are the latest jobs in such and such industry. And again, they know about these networks or these mailings, these e-lists, and they reach out to the people who run those lists. So they know, think about it, you're probably applying to a job that's posted on the job board, and there's thousands of resumes coming in. If they're sending that job to probably those networks, they will probably more than likely pull like from those networks, those special listings, because it's strictly targeted. And then they don't got to go through the stack, because they can say the people in this list are definitely, will be interested in our work. And then they already have like a reputation going through these different groups to look for people. So it's really interesting. That's why when you read a book like What Color Is Your Parachute, and this has been said in articles anyway, most people get their job through their networks. I can definitely say I got a good number of my jobs just through knowing people. So sometimes when I have those resume writers will contact me and they'll talk about the applicant tracking system. And I'm just like, to be honest with you, I get most of my jobs through through networking.
To networking, like, through people that I know, are organizations that I'm familiar with and that know me. I know them. So yeah, I definitely think that. To me, I talked to a guy, and he was saying that he didn't want to have to go after work to, I'm not saying I want to go out, well, I did say that I don't like going out after hours for happy hour. I keep that to a limit. Not say I might have a one drink, whatever, that has alcohol in it, but I limit that to a certain degree with coworkers. I just, to me, I want to keep it very professional. But so I'm willing to, to go to happy hour or some event after hours, after work hours, to socialize, to, camaraderie, all those things. But there are people that I listen to who say, I don't want to do any of that. After I clock out, I'm done. I'm going home. And I'm like, that's not really, you do have to network even within the job that you have. It's not just like I network to get a job. You have to also network to keep a job, and also to get ahead, to be promoted. So those are sort of things that you have to keep in mind as well. How do you feel about that?
Well, all those things.
Yeah. Are you the kind of person who decides that after I clock out, after my work day is over, I'm going home, forget sitting down with Sally and Johnny and discussing, work things or non-work things? I'm just going home.
Well, for me, I guess it just depends on the day. With my schedule, I have other things going on in the evening, so I have to. And Friday would really be that typical day. I would like hang out or have, that'd be my fun day.
But it is an option for you, though. It's something that you are willing to do. Okay, so that's really, if your schedule doesn't record, doesn't sort of jive with that day, then yeah. But But for me, it is an option. It's definitely something that I don't mind definitely doing if it's and I would advise anybody as a career coach, when they have functions that are after hours, go, go
Yeah.
um and talk and get to know people outside of their work clothes
Yeah.
or their work environment. And even if you can have a 5 minute conversation with people who you may not get a chance to have a 5 minute conversation with in the hallway at work because they're off to another meeting, or especially as someone who make hiring decisions or make decisions on terms of who gets raises and who gets promoted, you definitely want to be having conversations with those people. I'm not saying that it has to be a 30-minute conversation, but at least a 5-minute conversation to explain who I am and this is what I do at the company that I work at.
Yeah, I think that's where those lunch meetings come into, because I would think if you're, particularly if you have a family, you probably won't be able to do those evening things. But if you could do something during your lunch break, that probably will come into play. Because I see a lot of that is just going to be based on one's schedule and their priorities. So yeah, I thought about it just so for people, because that was the thing with my friend. It's like she's trying to figure all that out, and she has 2 kids at home, and trying to get all that stuff situated. So it gets a little like it's a little different from how she may be able to maneuver some things. So, but yeah, if you can't do it during the lunch breaks, or I say, or do it online, that's probably your other best bet. But that's the advantage of like the things happening right now. You can do those kind of things online. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things that I think sometimes people love interviewing, like this is sort of kind of an interview here in a way, but they are good talkers and they do very well in interviews and in job interviews. And then there are other people who feel as though they do horrible in job interviews and hate them. And so, what is how do you feel about job interviews? Do you like them? Do you hate them?
Well, it wasn't. I mean, in the beginning of my career, I wasn't a big fan of them and I think one of the reasons is just like, because you're trying to figure out what you're going to say, how you're going to say, what you're going to ask. And I think over time, when I started to get information from my colleagues and the type of questions to ask, it kind of helped me a lot because you feel like once upon a time you used to just feel like, they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. You may get in the couple and that's it. But as I've grown in my career and grown in the art of interviewing, particularly because I'm a journalist, it gives me, I feel like sometimes now I have an upper hand because as a journalist, I know how to ask maybe certain questions. And then I'm also looking at body language and how the answers are given to me, the responses. So I have all these different cues. So interviewing people on a TV program for almost 10 years, that part of the interviewing, now I'm more comfortable doing job interviews because I'm used to doing interviews with people as a journalist.
So so what kind of questions are you asking as someone who's being interviewed for a job? What is some of the questions that you ask the employer or the recruiter or the hiring manager or whoever that is that's actually doing the interviewing for the job? What are some of those questions that you formulate?
Well, I listen to what they asked first. And if they didn't answer certain questions, then I know that I start with those. So if the interviewer didn't explain why that position, if the person didn't explain that interview, why that person left the company or why they're seeking that position, why are you seeking new people for that position? That's a question you really should be asking.
Why the last person leave this job? Yeah. Are you trying to sit in a more...
Not necessarily the first question.
No, yeah.
But it should be definitely in the top 3 because that's going to give you some insight. And then the flip to that is if you're entering a position and it's a newly created position, you need to ask like what type, based on the craft of that job description, what really determined like the factors for that role in that position. If you've been in the field a long time, you really need to listen to that answer because you can find out whether or not they have some understanding of the work that it entails to be, to get done. If they don't have a clear understanding of it, that could be possibly a flag. So
Hmm.
that's something to keep in mind. Another question I asked them is to explain the typical workday. What is this person doing daily in this role? That's important to know. Like, what is
Hmm.
a typical day like for this person in this position? Um, will you, if you're in a position where you may have to manage people, you need to find out that if they didn't tell you that. Will you be managing someone? And I always say, if you're a manager and above that in that title, that's something you need to find out. If you're in an interview session with them and they have all these grand ideas and they want to do all these different things, you need to ask, what is the typical budget of, the department, so some of these goals can be executed. Because if they have a laundry list of goals and they don't have the budget to match those goals, that can
Now,
be a
what
factor.
organization that I think it always is for where I'm in, I am a financial manager and do budget analysis for companies, organizations. And it's always a laundry list of things that
Yeah,
they
the
would
wish list. I
love to
call it
do.
a
Yeah,
wish
the
list.
wish
I
list.
said, I said, I even used that. I said, do you have like a wish list? Because
Mm.
I need to understand if they're being realistic or
Um,
idealistic.
so the goals that they have, say for that year or for a 3 or 5 year plan,
Right,
and
exactly. What's the vision? What do you
what's the
see?
vision?
Oh yeah. Where do you see the organization going in the next 5 years? That's a really
Mhm.
important question. That
Yeah.
should be in your
And
top, in
what
the
what are
top.
you expecting me to do in this time in the next
Mm-hmm,
year or 2 years
mm-hmm.
and
Expectations.
expectations, and then because if they have all these expectations for the position that you're going to applying for, but they have no budget to do it, then that's a problem.
That's going to be a major problem.
Yeah, so
That's a
you're trying to
major
figure that
problem.
out. So you're trying to figure that out during the interview that, hey, I
Mm-hmm.
want to be sure that you're not setting me up for failure.
Right. And in the past I haven't asked questions like that, and I was set up for failure. So I
Hmm.
make sure I ask that, like a question like that. Yeah, I ask them what their ideal employee is going to look like or be. I do ask things like that. I also try to figure out ways to figure out the morale of the organization or the
Now
company you're
that's
in.
one thing that I wanted to talk about was, because no one goes into an interview, even if you want to know this, and say, how high is your retention rate? How fast people
Oh no,
leaving
you
here?
don't. There's other ways. There's other ways you can. There's other ways you
Tell
can do
me,
that.
how do you, what question
This
do
is
you ask
I'll
in order
share
to?
this. I'll share this secret with your audience, and your audience really can find out. One of the questions you can ask is, what does the organization do to
Boost?
some people will say like boost morale. I don't like,
Mm,
I don't, that's kind of like, you may not want to use the word morale. You say, what do they do? To, because there's a work day, you're spending most of your time around these people that because this is like, you spend more time almost like with the people you work with than your family. So what are you doing outside of a typical like work day where the employees are connecting with each other?
mm,
Do they celebrate birthdays? Do they go to happy hour? Do they celebrate birthdays? Do you do holiday celebrations? Like, most places will have, during the Christmas season, they have these holiday like
mm, mm,
dinners or holiday lunches. Find out if they do that and see how they respond to those things. Because some organizations may not do that at all. So, and some
mm.
organizations, they will do things like that. I will say that's one thing I remember during my time at the American Heart Association. They were really good about that, doing those kind of like
And
acknowledgement
it
of
was
the.
frequently, it was something that they
It was
did.
just part, yeah, it was part of the culture
Because
when
I've
I was
seen it
there.
that could be a hit or miss. Usually, if it's like a hit or miss, like sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't do it. It's kind of it's kind of
Yeah.
hit or miss. Then that's called a telltale. That tells some of the things like, okay, well, are you guys so got so many things going on, and your
Right.
employees are overwhelmed that
Right.
you don't
And
even
burned
have
out.
time and burnt out.
Exactly. That's how you find out. Really, that's
Mm-hmm.
how you find out. It's like, if you guys are working all the time and there's no like breaks, and people aren't connecting like that, they want to get away from each other at the end of the day. Yeah, those are the ways you can. Those are like questions like that you can find out. And there it's not like you're saying, oh, is the organization and that's bad morale, good morale. You
Mm-hmm.
just find out from like the additional activities, what's going, what's happening. So that's a important. That's definitely a question you want to find out in regards to probably the office culture, professional
Yeah, yeah.
development.
What is the office culture? I think that's a
Mhm.
good one.
And in another way you can do that too, if you're someone, it's sometimes, some employers will do this, and I usually say if they do this on their own, they're interested in having you there, and just probably just depend. Of course, a lot of this is also pre-COVID when I used to do this. I would ask them about like going around the office and
Hmm.
looking around.
Yeah, one thing that I've been, when I have applied for, went through an interview and they wanted to hire me off this, like, I went into the interview, they wanted to hire me immediately, right? So I was able to walk through the office,
Mhm.
and it's always disturbing to me when I walk into an office and I hear nothing. Everybody, I mean, and it's not saying it's empty. I'm just saying there are people there, lots of people, and there's like you hear a pin drop, and everybody
Mhm.
has their head down. Hostile environment. You do like
Mhm.
it was. you
Mhm.
know and then the other places that I've been, and you walk into the work area, and people are talking and communicating, and people are working together, and having one-on-ones, and and then it was a good environment to work inside of, because I mean, and there's no perfect, and from what I've experienced in my 25 years of working, there is no perfect environment, but there are some that are more perfect than others.
But yeah, there
So
are some that's definitely better than others.
oh
I
yeah.
can definitely see
Yeah, exactly.
that.
You don't want to go into a hostile environment. But
Mhm.
one thing that I've noticed as a sort of a line that runs through a hostile environment, if you're able to walk through in this day and age, everyone is working from home, so you may not have that advantage. But if you have that advantage to have an opportunity to walk through the office, just keep your ears and eyes open and seeing how people are interacting with each other, and it definitely gives you some insight to the office environment.
Mhm. And then that goes to the next question, which is another good reason to do that. And then you can check websites too. If diversity and inclusion is important to you, that's definitely
Mm,
something you should do.
mm,
Because you
mm-hmm,
may get in there and it's like, okay, I want to see more people that look like me.
mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the thing we have to always be concerned about too, is like how does that organization, and then it's particularly because of things that happened in 2020,
Yeah,
I
people of
think that's
color are
are
and
more conscious of
are more conscious of
accent
that.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing about it is that I worked in organizations where African American people, at certain levels of the organization, just wasn't there. So
Hmm.
when I show my African American face, it's not that I felt that people was were anti-black or whatever, I felt like they just hadn't been exposed to working that close with an African American male. So
Mhm.
they don't know
Mhm.
what to do. And it can't
Yeah.
come off as someone who it may be seen to be standoffish or whatever.
Mhm. Mhm.
And but it's just they never have. And how
Mhm.
do you get through that? How do you handle that? Because everyone is not very comfortable that at all. So that's one of the things that I think is important. Walking through the aisles, and I mean through the aisles, but through the halls,
Mhm.
and seeing, I like when they have those pictures of sort of like the executives up on the wall and so forth, and you see like no African Americans at all, or you see like one out of so out of all.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that you have to ask yourself: do I want to work in an environment where I may be the first African American that they have worked this closely with?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so go ahead.
Yeah, because the other thing you want to look at in things like that too is the hierarchy of the organization. If all the people of all the non-black, the non-white people are towards like in the lower level positions, and there's more of like the dominant society at the top,
Mhm.
that's another flag there. I hate this. I mean, some people may
Yeah,
take
it is a
offense to
flag.
that, but it's a big flag. It's a
But the
big
question
flag.
you have to ask yourself is, do I want to be in that environment?
Yeah,
And because it does come with
it's going to be
the
additional stress. I mean, just
it's going to be
that's just
additional
real.
stress,
Yeah.
exactly. But someone has to come going. I mean, I would never tell some African American person not to take a job because you're going to be the only African American there. It's like, no, that's not a reason to not accept that job unless that makes you totally uncomfortable and you just do not want to be
Yeah,
that
I mean, it's
person.
the preference. I learned from experience. I'm just big on diversity and inclusion, and from my work experience in various environments, I do well where there's more diversity and inclusion. I have more
Mm,
challenges where there's limited diversity in the upper management roles, because a lot of it's one's perception and comfort level. We still live in a society that people still are uncomfortable seeing non-white people in CEO and executive positions. And that's just
mhm.
unfortunately a reality you have to tend to. So that's why you do in these interviews, you got to say what's happening in the organization where they're being more conscious in regards to diversity and inclusion. It's not strictly on race, and you've got age and gender and people with those with disabilities and so forth. How are those things? How do they deal with those things in the office? What are they doing? Do they have they have like, do you have brown bag lunches, like sessions where people may come in and talk about various issues that's happening in society that
Mm.
kind of can be that avenue to
And
educate
brown
people?
bag lunches can be a good thing and a bad thing too. I remember I was at a position and they had like, oh, we're gonna have a brown bag lunch. And it would just mean that you wasn't going to get a lunch. That's what it meant. It means that bring your
That's why it's
lunch
called
because
brown. Bring your lunch. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like but I don't want to. It's like nobody wanted in that organization. They didn't want a brown bag lunch because it means that it's saying that we're going to work through lunch, and you better get 5 minutes to grab something. So nobody.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that goes to that's another issue you need to find out. Now, this is another thing that will come into play when you're applying. You need to find out, like in regards to your work and probably also within the organization itself, find out there, you have to figure out a way about having policies and procedures structured. So for example, when I do interviews as a person coming from a writing or journalism background, I will ask the organization, do you have style guides? And some of them are very shocked by this. And I asked them this because your organization needs to have like protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm coming in and I'm writing, because I'm a journalist, I come from an Associated Press background. Most of the jobs I had early in my career, even in the PR realm, you had to know they say AP style. And then other places they may have AP style and the branding style of the organization. So if you don't have any kind of systems, guidelines for how things are done in the organization, that could be a problem. So for example, brown bag lunches. Wouldn't it be nice? Because in a lot of cases, it was the employees. They had to, some cases, the employees volunteer to coordinate those brown bag
Yeah,
lunches.
I like that idea, but on employees are volunteering to do that.
And they developed a structure or plan on how frequent you will do them. Will there be times where you're actually the food will be catered from the office versus people bringing in the bag lunch, things like that. So another thing is I would say when you're interviewing, you find out what systems or structures or policies are in place, and that's relevant either to the organization or your department. So for other fields, I can't really say outside of what I know in communications realm, but I am big on style guides. Because you'll have 5 different people write 5 different ways. And when it gets down to editing a document, like a newsletter that's going to go out to everybody, that person comes in and they're going to edit it based on the style they prefer. And then you're going to have the same other people coming back.
Yeah, so basically he's saying you need a template.
Change this way. Yeah, because you never got on the same page. That's one thing. That's another thing. I was like, if you're telling me to do a writing sample for a job or something, I will ask them. I was like, okay, what's your style guide? What is the editorial, process, whatever for that? So I know. And if you don't have one, I'm like, yeah, I'm not taking the job unless you expect that person coming in to do that, which kind of could be a challenge in itself, because again, somebody coming in trying to bring guidelines, rules, and structure, some people are not, then that could be conflict in itself. So make sure you find out what the processes are if you can during those interviews. Another thing I do ask, because like you said, people don't like interviews and people feel awkward and nervous.
Some people just feel like they don't interview well. And I'm like, and that's a horrible place to be in when you feel the way, because I feel like if you already saying that to yourself, then
you're doing the things it's gonna hurt your esteem and hurt your confidence. So I would say with people like that, they may need to do kind of work with someone else and go through a round of interviews and be coached. That's like you being coached to interview.
Definitely need coaching.
They need to be somebody needs that.
That could definitely be. I think that could definitely, because you're talking about yourself. That's
right.
it.
It's about you. You're selling yourself.
Right. You're selling yourself.
You have to be confident about selling yourself. Which like I said, when you go on these like when I go on interviews now, I ask the people who are interviewing me, what made you decide to choose this job? I really want to know. I'm like, what made you decide to work here? Because people like to talk about themselves. And I think
I know I do. So.
And I think that helps a lot, because people become, when you're talking about yourself, you become more comfortable. So I think in the beginning,
you're supposed to. You're supposed to.
Because I feel like when you start interviewing the employer, you go back and asking questions as you are interviewing the employer. You need to know these things too, because it gives you a lot of insight on why people are there. And you can tell by the type of answers. It's like, this person's serious about this, her role in her position, or, okay, this is a person who's this is probably their bridge job. You can find out by the type of questions and, you're asking and the responses.
The kind of answers that you're providing.
Right.
It definitely gives you insight to longevity, like you said, it's just, your job that you're going to take just to get to, some other place, so I definitely understand that. So that's make sure, like, when you look at your resume, and if you like what you see on your resume, you can feel really confident. You go in there, and I always have the mindset now, I'm going to wow these people when I go in there. And I know I'm going to wow them because I've done so many cool things. But practicing is the key. There's books. Now there's the internet. You can go on the internet and find out what type of, just get a relative, somebody that you trust, that's going to just ask you. And it's 10 questions that, in my book, the Job Promotion Manual, shameless plug. It's just 10 questions that you're typically going to be asked in every interview. You're going to get, at least one of those questions, and just having someone ask you those questions and you just giving the answers to your best of your ability, and just have that loved one or that friend say, hey, that was a good answer, or I need to work on that, can be a big help. So yeah. That's right. Actually, we should be referencing your book moving forward. In DJ's book. In DJ's book, there's these 10 questions.
He has these things here. I'm gonna let my friend know to check your book out.
Yes, I'll send a free copy to your friend. She give me her address. I'll send you a free copy of my book.
Okay, I'll
The
send
job
you.
promotion manual. I'll put the link in the job in the show
Mhm,
description. Well,
mhm.
for our last thing before this particular show ends, and Jackie will be back next week to have another discussion. And for it'll be our last question. So there's a Zoom meeting that I joined, and I didn't get an invite or anything like that. You forwarded it to me, but I jumped on this meeting and I forgot the name of it. And I had this great conversation with different, like maybe 5 or maybe 7 people that was on the call and all, and it was a great conversation. What Zoom call? What meeting was that?
Oh, Pup Theology. Yeah, that's
Yes.
starting back up this month too. It's going to be on the third. It's starting back up again, third Tuesdays of the month. And
Okay. Well, promote that. Let's.
yeah,
How can people
and
jump
if
on
people,
that one?
sure, people can go to my meetup group on meetup.com/interfaith connections. And there you can look at all the events and other activities that's coming up this month that's happening. And then you can look for the Pub Theology one to join. I'll make sure I
Okay.
get September's in there.
Well, send me the
Yeah,
link so I can add them in the show description. The show description, so people can
for
definitely find out
sure.
more about those, about Toastmasters and about Puffology. You said
Pub, like going to the pub. Pub Theology.
Pubology. Oh,
Pub
Pub
Theology. Pub.
Theology. Oh, I like so. That's a great name. So
Uh-huh.
thank you, Jacob, for joining us, and tune in next week for part 2 of our discussion. And we'll move away from, even though I am a job coach and I love discussing career coaching and life coaching, but we will go more into the discussion on Bill Cosby. And I know Bill Cosby isn't he's still a hot topic, but he is not, it's been some months since he was vindicated. But we still have some things to discuss about Bill Cosby. So join us next week for that discussion, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. Bye.
All right. Bye bye.